Hi again, it's Jason from Fraser Valley Rose Farm, and I guess I've already spilled the beans on this news, is that Lisa and I are planning to offer cut flowers to our on-farm guests this year, and to that end, we started to build this section of the farm here, including those raised beds I showed you, the picket fence, I showed you the arbor. Well, this is brand new right here. This is sort of a potting or cutting bench, and the funny story of this is that our kids stopped using the play set in the front yard. They'd outgrown it. It had a lot of good cedar lumber in it, so we tore it down, rebuilt it into this, painted it, and I'll probably throw in some cute footage of us doing that. So this is one of the finishing touches of our cut flower offering, and I shouldn't pass this by without saying that this canvas that's in here kind of dresses it up a little bit, gets us that instant artsy look that we wanted to. This was given to us by Tailored Canvases, so I am going to include a coupon code and some information about that in the bottom of the video. I hope you don't mind, because they were gracious enough to send it to us for free. But what I really wanted to talk about as the topic of this video is how we're selecting which flowers we're growing as cut flowers this year, annuals versus perennials, particularly because I've always been a perennial guy. I was a perennial grower for many years, and I'm kind of biased that way. I always kind of figured if you're going to put something in the ground once and then it can produce year after year after year, that's a great value for you. But in the cut flower game, it isn't quite so simple an analysis of that. I want to give you some pros and cons of both the annuals and perennials as cut flowers and tell you why, as a balanced approach, you'd probably want to have both. Well, the way I make sense of things is I usually make a chart. I compare the attributes of one versus the other. And so I'm going to give you a quick chart here that's a comparison between perennials and annuals as cut flowers, starting with the question of where do you get them. So perennials, the better ones anyway, are generally produced by vegetative cuttings rather than by seed. And so if you want to get the better varieties of perennials, you're kind of relying on third parties to supply those for you. Some are produced by seed, and I'm producing a bunch by seed now. And just the one thing to watch out for is that if you're producing perennials by seed, they sometimes need a special step called stratification, a cold treatment before the seeds will germinate. With annuals, it's a lot more straightforward. They're all available from seed, and they generally start very, very quickly from seeds, very easily. Next dimension that they vary on is how long it takes them to be productive in the garden. So perennials can take a year or two to find their feet in the garden and produce a lot of stems. Annuals, always the first season. The example or comparison I would make here is between the perennial Delphinium and the annual Larkspur, which these are just cousins, but one is perennial, one is annual. The Delphiniums can take a while to send up multiple stems from the same base, whereas the Larkspurs are quick and easy from seed. It's also the case that perennials tend to come in a narrower range of colors, bloom times, bloom forms than their annual cousins when you're comparing them directly across. And the example I would use for this is something like scabiosa, which I grew for many years as a perennial. It never impressed me all that much because it either comes as a purple, a bluish purple, or a pinkish purple, and that's basically your range of colors. You go over to the scabiosa in the annuals, which again is just a close cousin, and you get the full range of colors. You have white, pink, red, yellow, a wide range of colors. The same thing I'm going to find on limonium or goniamon is the perennial, where it's just got this one dusty blue color when it's a perennial, but in the annuals it is just a rainbow of colors. So that's I would give annuals the plus on that. Now, one thing I would say that is the benefit of the perennials is what I mentioned at the front end of this video. Once you plant them, you get them established in your garden, you really don't have to replant them every year. That's a plus side to the perennials. And the annuals, you'll have to replant them every single year, restart them every single year. But there is a downside that comes with being the same plant every year, is that you get the same plant every year. So perennials are, in a certain way, they're going to be kind of boring and compared to the annuals. You're always going to get the same plant. If you have a Rudbeckia, it's always going to be the same Rudbeckia. But if you have to replant your annuals every year, you might choose a different variety with a different bloom time, different bloom form, different bloom color. So you do get to refresh your assortment, and that can be an advantage in cut flowers. And finally, I'll just add one more note here, is that perennials are bred for garden performance typically. And so the trend in their breeding is to bring the stem size lower and to make them more compact plants. And that's what I've seen in the perennial business for many years. And those breeding programs, by comparison to the annual ones, are slower. So they're introducing these plants, yes, certainly at a steady pace, but slower than they are with the annuals, Whereas with the annuals, they are bred on a short cycle. They have a short life cycle, and they are being bred actively for longer stems, more showy, impressive flowers. And so it's really resulting in something where if you have something that is a choice between an annual and a perennial within the same genus, generally the annuals are a much showier plant. While those comparisons may work in general, you will find that within each group there are some flowers that are basically irreplaceable. Within the perennials, of course, there's things like roses, which is more actually a shrub, or peonies, or large flower dahlias that just can't be replaced by anything on the annual side. And within the annuals, you're going to find things like zinnias, or sweet peas, or large sunflowers that just have no equivalent on the perennial side. So in some cases, you don't have a choice. If you want a full range of flowers, you have to have some of each. Now let me take you inside and show you what I've chosen for this year. Moving from theory into practice now, it is the perennials that I've started first because they take a little bit of extra time getting going. So a lot of the seedlings you see on this table are from perennials. I'll give you a list of the perennials I intend to use for cut flowers, or at least some of them. It's an incomplete list, but this one happens to have come from cuttings. This is the Coreopsis solana series. And as I mentioned, some of the better varieties of perennials for cut flowers are from cuttings. And those I took from cuttings, I stuck them in the end of December, and they're just about ready to go into pots now, but of course I have to wait for it to warm up a little bit more out there. Now as for ones that I'm starting from seed, and again you have to start the perennials from seed quite early, this is an Achillea, Achillea ptarmica, which is a beautiful white sort of drumstick looking Achillea. The flatter shaped Achilleas I have or yarrows I have in the garden as well. Some of the ones that I've started from seed as well, this one here is, I don't know if you're going to get the leaf shape on that, but those are Delphiniums. And I also have some Digitalis over here, or foxglove. In fact, the whole bench here is full of a lot of different perennials that I'm either producing for cut flowers or for potted plants that I'm selling on the farm here. So this is the start. In addition to those ones that I showed you, I'm also doing some from bulbs. So I have Liatris and I have lilies, both of which are pretty inexpensive. And then from the landscape, I have some established perennials, things like bee balm or obedient plant. I also have some really nice echinacea out there that I'll be using as cut flowers, some salvia. So that's sort of a partial list of my perennials that I'll be using as cut flowers. The annuals I'm just starting to seed now. Those perennials needed a head start because they start out a little bit smaller, but the annuals are faster moving, and typically you can't really seed them much ahead of, say, 10 or 12 weeks ahead of your last frost. So for me, I'm starting to enter into that period here. So you can see that some of the ones I'm using here, I'll be using some zinnias here. I have status or limonium that I'll be trying out. I'm not as familiar with the annuals as I am with perennials, but there's some I definitely want to try. People have told me snaps are kind of indispensable in the cut flower garden. Of course, up here I have my helianthus or sunflower varieties. I wanted to try a couple of varieties of scabiosa. This one here in a nice yellow color that struck me from the catalog. I have some sweet peas or lathyrus here. This is Delphinium or Larkspur, the annual version. Some annual China asters. And then I have some stalks, and that's about the whole selection I'm going to be trying. And just quickly let me reacquaint you with where I'm starting these off. I'm quite sure I showed you last year that I have this germination chamber. It's actually during the year it doubles up as my cut flower cooler, but I'm just going to pull off the cover here and show you that inside here I already have some things set to seed. This chamber can hold up to 12 at a time. It's warm and it's moist in here, so that's why you may see a little bit of humidity build up on the camera lens as I do this. But if you look down at the bottom here, there's a controller that says that it is 23 degrees Celsius in here currently and about 67% humidity, which is actually pretty good. I mean, there's the trays themselves are wet already. At those temperatures we should have germination in no time. Well, thanks for joining me while I explore the differences between annuals and perennials as cut flowers. I hope you'll join us back again throughout the season as I get those seedlings off the benches, grow them up a bit, get them into the garden, and show you what they really can do as a display. Now, I want to mention at the end of the video here that Tailored Canvases offered a discount code, Fraser15. I'll put that in the description below. To anybody who's kind of interested in their art canvases, we're using this in kind of a non-traditional way, having it outdoors like this. Actually, it's not really intended for that. It's more for indoor areas or covered areas. So we'll just be using this on sunny days outdoors and taking it in on rainy days. So it actually should dress up that downstairs seating room quite nicely. Okay, once again, thanks so much for watching. And if you have any questions about cut flowers at all or any other perennials or plants, please drop them into the comments below the video. I'll see what I can do to help.